Now, as North American cities go, Toronto's honestly, I've never particularly liked it. I just think the city itself is, I don't know, because of how modern most of the city is. There's just not really much of a soul in it, and like a lot of cities, it's very much a very like it's very diverse, which diversity is fine in small quantities, but at some point you get so much of it that it kind of just makes an area feel like the UN, where it's just like every city you go to starts to look the same. And it's the same with a lot of the architecture. Like when you are lucky enough to have older buildings like this would be a defining building for Toronto, like this very impressive hotel building. But a lot of it's the same sort of soulless boxes you see everywhere. Like these buildings, these could all be in any city. This could be in any city. These buildings could be in any city. That one's a little unique. Like it's got some dimension to it, which I appreciate. And it's not just a box. Like a lot of these buildings, if you look at them, are just boxes. And even the ones that aren't boxes, like this historic looking building here, it's kind of just completely gutted, and they've gotten rid of a lot of the decorative parts. Like there would be a decorative cornice up here, and that's all been replaced with sheet metal. I don't. Let me see if there's a better picture of this from back when. It looks like it's been that way for a while, but you'll see what I mean. Just the soul's kind of gone out of it, and that's what they tend to do with these historic buildings. Is they'll take this probably would have had double hung windows in it that gave the building more character. You probably had like an overhang in the front here, like you can see the remnants of it right here along the wall, either an overhang or an addition. And that's like most of this has all been removed, and it's kind of just a flat. It's almost like a picture of a historic building rather than an actual historic building. Like there's no dimension, everything's kind of been flattened. And that's what they do with a lot of these historic buildings. They'll just take all the kind of soul out of it. And if you look down here, you can get an idea of what it looked like. It had a little more dimension to it. These would be original windows here. And as you can see, they added a lot of depth to the front of the building. And that's kind of the last traces of that. Just imagine this whole building with windows like this throughout it. I mean, it was probably a lot prettier back in the day, but I don't know what it is about them building office buildings where they just have to look the same and just be completely soulless everywhere you go. Like I think it's a psychological thing to make people kind of be like you're all part of the same thing or whatever, or trying to just break people down. You can see this is an Art Deco building here again with the windows, like it's all the flat glass. Like this would have had double hung windows in it too. They would have been the Art Deco ones where it's like slats up here, slats down here, and just like that, like something kind of streamlined looking. And it's just completely changed the building. And another thing you might notice is the lack of small businesses in a lot of cities, like in North America. Like you've got this restaurant here, but like what else is there? There's, let's see, I can't even find a name on this. That's something I dislike about something else they do with historic buildings is they say you're not allowed to put signs or the signs has to match the building, but it's often like local signs and things that gives a place character, and I can barely tell what kind of business this is even supposed to be. Like I see that, so I'm guessing a convenience store of some kind, but you just don't know. And like this is all right. This sort of 90s like this isn't as bad looking as some of the office buildings. See, what they did here was they added a little bit of color and a little bit of style to at least the ground floor of the building. The rest of the building's not terribly interesting, but at the very least, the part that you're walking by is kind of interesting and inviting. Like, you can't say that about a lot of other buildings. Like this one right across here, it's not, it's maybe interesting, but it's not inviting. It's very cold and just I was reading about Blackstone, and this looks like Blackstone's headquarters. I wonder if can we see? No, TD Bank. I don't. That might be. Or wait, no, no, Blackstone I thought was in New York though. Yeah, Blackstone's American. I'm just being stupid. But this one's kind of interesting. It's got some angles and stuff on it. Same with this one. It's got a little bit of angles. It's again, I wish there was more depth when it comes to up here because this just looks like a big flat front, whereas down here there's a little bit more depth to it. Like a lot of the buildings just kind of look like boxes, and like me being an artist, when I draw cityscapes for people, it makes it a lot easier to draw the cityscapes, the fact that all these buildings look the same, but that's not a compliment, that's a negative. And they they uh they kept the facade of a historic building down here, you can see. Looks kind of out of place, but at the same time I'm glad it's still here. I'm not one of those people who's like uh like everything has to be pure, you can't mess around with anything. I'm not one of those people, but I would rather this building match this. Like they could have easily done extended this out this way and that way and added many, many floors onto it to create this skyscraper, but still keep the same architectural style. Because this is a very pretty architectural style, and it's very much very unique to the U.S. and Canada. Um, like this architectural style you won't see anywhere else. Like England had their own sort of Victorian era architecture that looks slightly different from ours. Ours is a little bit more, a little bit less, like I guess less conservative. The English style of Victorian architecture was actually a little bit more conservative than the American. American architecture was pretty was was uh was a lot more a lot more interesting. At least I think it was more interesting. I'm not going to say it's prettier because both architectural styles are prettier. It's just I have the preference for the one that's a little bit more detailed and a little bit more gaudy. Like but you can see this all, like this one's not it's not terrible to look at. It really isn't. They actually added some character to the windows with this pattern here. It's not the same as like this one back here. But the top, it's again, it's a big box. There's no sort of depth to the top of it. And then the bottom here, it's the same as other office buildings where ideally on the ground floor of an office building, you want there to be like shops and restaurants and things for the office workers to go to between their shifts. You don't want all this dead space here. And that's what this all is just dead space. Like you want this to be filled with stores and things, and you also again want the bottom to look attractive to people from the ground level. And like there will be people who say that this architecture is attractive in its own way, but I don't know. I disagree with them, and most people I talk to disagree with them too. Like your average person who's going to work in these buildings, like they don't come downtown and look and say, "Wow, that I'm so happy to be working here every day." They just see a big soulless box. Like that's what a lot of these buildings are, and it's like it's good that they have the nature here because if there was no nature, this would be a really, really depressing environment. I'm sure it is in wintertime, this being Canada and all, and they have some pretty brutal winters. And again, like you've got a bottom floor that's devoid of any form of like business, with the exception of this place, which I assume, yeah, it's some kind of bar. But ideally, you'd want more than one place at the bottom of the building because, and a place like this looks expensive. I don't think that the average employee at this building is going to be eating at this place every day. This is going to be for people with a little bit more money. But I've never liked these slabs here for benches. I've always thought this just looked like crap. And I think this is more than just for benches. I think this is for security as well, so that people can't drive vehicles into here and blow it up from the ground floor. But again, it doesn't look welcoming. It doesn't look cheerful. If I was working in these buildings, this wouldn't get my mood up coming down here and having a seat. It's just very gloomy, and especially the fact that these might be purely just for security is even more. Like they could have done something interesting with having security blocks. I've seen them done in a more interesting way. Like even these bollards here, even these look better. Like not particularly pretty, and there should be something to break up this line a little bit, but I don't know what it is with modern architects and just making long lines of just monotonous stuff. It's not attractive. It it's not like architecture and design should lift the human soul. It shouldn't be something where it's purely for practical purposes and it's just a big box. And in Canada, it's not even necessarily practical to have a big box because flat roofs kind of suck in climates where you get a lot of snow and rain and stuff. I know in my area there's tons of problems with flat roofs. And now I'm not a huge fan of Art Deco, to be honest, the like streamlined Art Deco. I don't think it's particularly attractive. Like what I'm talking about is the sort of minimalist Art Deco stuff. The like I just don't find this building attractive now. There's a lot of people who do disagree with me. I do know that there's a lot of people that very much like Art Deco. I just think I don't know, it needs some color. It needs a little bit of a flair to it to make it look a little bit more more sort of colorful, more rich. Like, it's very somber looking, and it's not an ugly building. Like, don't get me wrong, I just don't think it's particularly interesting. And again, I'm one of those people who thinks that architecture should lift the human spirit. And also, again, the ground floor should be shops and businesses. Like that's the trouble with a lot of American cities. A lot of American like people who do engineering and layouts and stuff, they've got it in their head that they got to have like one purpose or a very small number of purposes for each building, and and so they design even in our cities. We tend to design buildings like this, where it's only for one use, and like, if there are shops, they're, like, underground or something like that, which makes sense in Canada, like, the ground's a stable temperature, so makes sense for them to be underground, and, it's not too bad, though, the Art Deco stuff, like, it's alright. I don't know, I guess this would be neoclassical, not Art Deco. It's from the same era, though, very similar architecture. I think this one's a little bit prettier with the arches and stuff. I love this, like, detail here. And I know the Art Deco movement was when they first started to well, the Art Deco streamlined because some Art Deco buildings were pretty lavish, but a lot of Art Deco streamlined, like the one back here, like you just don't see that sort of detail on the ground floor, and that's the stuff that whenever I see it, just brings a smile to my face to see all this detail. And I'm sure a lot of the people working there can appreciate it to a degree. And this I don't know. I kinda don't hate it, it's interesting, but, I don't know, I like these geometric shapes. I used to play a video game where you could design stuff like this it was an MS-DOS game, and this is back when, many people had already like, MS-DOS wasn't even in regular use. This is the worst here, this stuff. This you look at and it's just kind of very it makes you feel very isolated and like there's something genuinely like off about this sort of architecture where it's this sort of minimalist and it's just this big empty space. There's something really unnerving about it, and and I've always that this is my least favorite form of architecture, this kind of minimalism. There's something very cynical, very cruel, very unfeeling about it. It's very, cold. I like Apple stores look like this, but Apple stores are full of people, so that kinda offsets it a little bit. More of this architecture, I don't know. Like this stuff, I don't hate it, but, it's not the best, but it's not the worst either. Like genuinely, I've seen a lot worse buildings than this, and hey, they've got retail on the ground floor, which is nice. But you'll see again, not many small businesses here. Like we saw those couple of restaurants and that one place. What was it called? That little convenience store. That's what I was talking about. A little drugstore right here. Um, I've never heard of Shoppers. I think that must be it's either a Canadian chain or something like that. But you don't usually see stuff like that where it's like I don't know, drugstores especially, you don't see a lot of independent drugstores anymore. They're very, very uncommon. Like this is the kind of stuff I like though. This like neoclassical stuff. I think this is really pretty. I think something else we need to get out of our heads and I saw another video on this, like one of the like somebody was criticizing building skyscrapers. And I don't think that we should stop building skyscrapers. I disagree with that part. But the idea that our entire downtowns are just composed of skyscrapers. I mean, this is the type of area where you come downtown to work and nobody really wants to stay here because it's just not a great, like not a particularly interesting area, not a particularly fun area. It's just one of those things. I love their lights though. These lights are really nice. Now, are like these are I don't know if these are going to be sort of a warm light or if they're that awful blue LED that every city seems to be moving to, but I these are really cool looking lights though. Like I haven't seen another city with lights that look exactly like this. I've seen ones with similar lights, but not ones that are identical. These are really nice. And this type of architecture I actually do like. This is when Art Deco kind of came back into style in the 90s, and like the people in the 90s did their own sort of twist on it. And I've always liked it. It's very fun, very kind of warm. Like they used a lot of like granite or like like I don't know if this is real granite or not, but they used a lot of this material on it. And I always thought the buildings were kind of nice looking. And it's again, this one's okay. Like this section's not terribly interesting, especially because some of the buildings they did during that time were really elaborate. I'm not a fan of these 70s buildings. Really don't like them. Again, very very soulless architecture. You could go to any city and see a building that looks just like this. But you got this one right here. This is a beautiful building here. But we are getting here actual businesses on the ground floor, which is really really good to see. Like you've got a bunch of little small businesses here. And then across the street, oh yeah, you got one over here. I thought it was a dead zone, but I guess this place is just empty. No, it's not empty, just these two windows. This is very strange. Like if it were me, I'd put like a overhang here or like an awning or something. Like this doesn't stand out as like a bakery. Like this thing you kind of barely notice. And you look the interior is actually kind of decent on this. A lot of places have gone to that minimalism, that sort of modern minimalism that I absolutely despise. Like I don't think there's any more sort of soul-crushing architecture than like the modern minimalist movement, and like everybody's doing it. So it's one of those things you look at and you hope it changes soon. Like you really do. Like more of these lights. I really like these lights. Like that's something that impresses me. And that's not easy to do. I've become very, very, very jaded. So me being impressed is good. I don't know who the Canadian press is. I don't trust a lot of news sources anymore. A lot of them just ignore important stuff. More of these windows like this. And what if and when the AC breaks down in this building, I feel very bad for the people who have to rent here because none of these windows open. Like that's another thing. Ideally, if I was designing these buildings, I would want windows that opened. And like you can see again, it really takes away from the look of the building. Like it needs a nice big cornice here. And the purpose of a cornice was not just decorative. Now, part of the reason why older buildings had a very like see this big cornice here? Part of the reasons they had this was to kind of partially shelter the facade of the building so that water doesn't just run directly down here down the facade. And you can see there's another smaller one right here. So even when water comes in here, it'll still be kind of sheltered from the building. And then there's another one down here. So that was the purpose of these big cornices and like and then like down here you have the nice awnings to keep people sheltered when they're entering. These ones I don't like the ones that are just decorative. I think these should come out further. But I suppose in this area you want as much light as you can get, so you wouldn't want big awnings. So I guess I can kind of understand those just being decorative. Bore like it's not. It has an arch. It's very strange architecture. Like you can tell they kind of wanted a little bit of they wanted to give it a oh no, this is all right looking. This isn't a bad looking building. I'm not complaining there. I actually appreciate when the newer buildings kind of overhang the sidewalk a little bit like that because again you get a little sheltered area under here, which is nice. But it doesn't look like I don't know. Do they have stores down here? There's like one bank branch. Yeah, just a bank branch. That's closed. UPS store. Um, salon. You'll notice in most Western cities, the businesses that are started downtown, unless they're a restaurant. Well, even restaurants are usually owned by foreigners. Like I don't, and when I look at that, it just makes me sad for just. It seems like the entrepreneurial spirit isn't as alive in the U.S. as it used to be. But see a block here of just older buildings. Now this is another thing I I've mentioned before my thoughts on facadism, and I don't hate it. I'd rather see the facade of the building preserved because the one of the most important uh, things about buildings downtowns, like buildings in areas like this, is you want the human scale at the very least at ground level. So these like little stores and stuff. But something I dislike is they'll usually buy up rows of buildings like this who had like this probably had more working class tenants and like residents and stuff in it, and they're gonna build a massive office building above and behind it, and that's gonna make these spaces a lot more expensive. So the advantage of these little buildings is usually the space in them is cheaper, but but they're gonna make it a lot more expensive by building these office buildings. And then again, you have the businesses removed, you have all the interesting signs removed. In a lot of cities, you can't even install signs like this anymore, which I think is stupid. It takes a lot of the life out of the city once all the signs are gone. Now, I agree there can be kind of a compromise where it's like you can have restrictions on the size of a sign. Like I understand that. I just don't like people should be allowed to put up like flashy signs so that you know where their business is. But getting in a bit of an interesting area. Like this is kind of interesting. Like I don't hate certain types of 80s architecture. Like this is okay. Just it's a little bit lifeless. That's my only complaint. And I don't agree with the whole idea that there seems to be this mentality among people where it's like, oh, we need to build whatever's current and stuff like that. And it's bullshit. There's no current architecture. Like this Gothic church over here, Gothic architecture like has been built over and over at different time periods. It's been done so many times. Like this is probably turn of the century, like late 1800s they built this church, and Gothic architecture originated like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So this whole idea that we can only build certain types of architecture at certain times and we can't build something that's not in vogue or whatever is just it's complete nonsense. It's bullshit. You don't and I've seen plenty of very nice looking new buildings built that resemble the historic architecture of the area, and just it's a lot of modern architecture is very soul destroying, and but that's what they insist on building for whatever reason. But this building, oh man, I hate this type of architecture. I hate it so much. This just box here with no like all sharp edges, just very. very unfriendly looking architecture, very jarring. Now, they've done one thing right in that they've given this a little bit of dimension here, and that's probably the only compliment I can give this building. That and it's more than one color, because a lot of times these are just one color, but like they can also go into the just the absolute sort of gaudiness when it comes to colors. Like you compare this to this, which this building is a lot prettier and also at the same time a lot more subdued, like with uh compared to this building. And this is one of those ones where people look at it and they're like, "Oh, it's really cool looking for like the first like year that it's up," but then people get tired of this architecture really quick. And it's not that they start to hate it and they start to be enraged by it. It's just that they become apathetic. Like they just kind of accept that it's here and that there's not much they can do about it being here. But do we at least have a small um looks like one small business. That's another thing they do is they have these really really simplified signs, and that's another thing that takes a lot of the soul out of a place. Like this whole pizza company, this place, I've seen a million businesses with signs just like this where it's like 2 to 4 letters, and it doesn't really give you much. Like this sign, this could be the sign for a bank, this could be the sign for an office building, this could be a sign for one of those horrible like what this could be like a sign for like an investment firm, something like that. This does not make me think pizza. This makes me think investment firm. This makes me think bank. This makes me think office building. Like that is something where your sign should reflect what you are, but every business wants to do this. Every single new business wants to do this minimalist look, and I think that's because they literally see everyone else doing it. Either that or the same engineers that design these buildings are also designing the signs for the restaurants that end up in here, which could be the case. It wouldn't surprise me. This building is missing something at the top here. I think it must have had a cornice, or it might have had a more elaborate roof here. And you can see it looks really weird, like without that on the building. Like it's like these are like this layer here. Now, if you think of a building like a person, this layer is the shoes. This is the pants and the shirt, and the roof or the cornice is the hat. And this one kind of has that. It's more like shoes, shirt, and pants. I don't know. I've always thought buildings should have something to top it. It shouldn't just be a flat thing, just cut off like. There's a cynicism that's running in our society, and that's what I think is the cause behind a lot of this. Like, I can't imagine that all the architects just want to design stuff that looks like this, and there's no architects that are like, oh, I want to design something more attractive. Like, I think it's just an underlying cynicism. But that's just a theory. Like, see this? Is this is a pub here, and I know it's a pub because I can look at this, and this is the architecture of a pub, and I really appreciate that it's the architecture of a pub. And I actually like the gaudy color. Like, I've seen people complain about things being painted bright colors like that, but I actually like it. I like it a lot. And you've got all this nice signage and stuff. It's very nice, very cheerful. Toronto, though, oh, that's kind of neat. Kind of like that. Here you got another sort of like this building's been molested pretty bad. you, you can see this used to be this was built as a unit, but these would have been three separate buildings. Like each one would have had a different owner. Like they would have been small alterations to each one. But looks like the same owner bought the whole thing and just did whatever. I like this is a nicer street than the last one though. Definitely more appealing. Like that's a decent looking building. If most new buildings look like that, then I wouldn't complain. because you can see it's toned down a little bit. It's still colorful, still cheerful, still got warmth to it. But again, that's just my views. People probably disagree with me. I hate this stuff. Like, they've been going out of their way to make something unique, and there's a certain point when you cross the threshold of trying to be unique where it just you end up going like it's like a horseshoe thing where in attempting to be as unique and out of this world as possible, it just ends up looking very generic. And that's a problem with a lot of these buildings as well, even though I do like this building. I like the shape of it, I like the roof line, but not much dimension to it. I would indent the windows a little further like on these older buildings. Like, you look at this looks like an actual building. Like, this looks like it looks more real, if that makes sense. Like, you look at these buildings and you wouldn't like they almost look fake, like they're not actually there, like they're just painted on. And you can see here, is there an older picture of this? It looks like there was more detail in this building, but they took it all off at some point to kind of like I don't know for what reason, but it kind of spoils the building. It just looks like a big brick box now. We're lucky that a lot of our cities were built up at the turn of the century because like architecture hasn't really improved much since then. It's kind of gone backwards. But sometimes I go through cities and I just think to myself, man, this looked better. Like that looked better as a parking lot, I think. It's like they oh, okay. That's a little weird. Nice little campground here. Nice little open space for homeless people to camp out in here. Honestly, with the housing prices in Toronto, they should open more places for homeless people to just camp out. Sometimes I feel like people should just go and start occupying spaces again. But not like the Occupy movement did. That was a mess. But you've got these lights here. Like, we're definitely in the section of the city that they wanted to be more modern. Now, granted, these are unique lights. I can't say that they're all entirely bad because they're at the very least unique looking. It's not just these ones that you see in every single spot known to man in North America at least. Like, it's at least a little bit interesting. And you've got this light down here, which is kind of traditional. I wonder if these were put in the 90s because this looks like that Art Deco stuff that was really popular in the 90s. So I'm kind of guessing that those were installed then. But I don't know why they had these ones at the corners. I guess they probably couldn't find matching lights for that when they redid this whole corner area. I wonder if they had no, they just had just the regular pole lights, the same as the other ones. That's really weird. I wonder why they didn't do those types of lights that they had everywhere else here. Um, it's kind of weird, but more and more, I kind of like in certain places, I kind of like seeing parking lots downtown because it's like you can kind of actually get a good view of all the buildings and depending on your views on architecture, that could be a good or a bad thing. Like this, I don't know. It's unique looking, but it's at the point where it's just so weird looking. It's just not attractive looking at all. Are these residential buildings? Because they almost look like apartment buildings. But I don't know. I see buildings like this, and I can't imagine who would actually want to live in them. And I don't know. Maybe somebody watching this video lives in one of these, and they think it's the greatest thing, but it just looks depressing. And from what I hear, people who live in places like this tend to get very isolated and very depressed. But I don't know. I'm not complaining about people wanting to move downtown. I hope more rich people do move downtown. The housing's pretty overpriced as it is out in the suburbs, and I want to stay. I kind of want to stay in the area that this is one of those pictures that you could take anywhere. Like change the language on these signs, and this could be Hong Kong. Could be Shanghai. This could be Beijing. This could be like Frankfurt, Germany. This could literally be anywhere, and that's something I hate about modern architecture. I absolutely hate that. And more and more, I think people are going to start looking for the really unique places because just there's nothing to see here. And I realize it's Toronto. It's not exactly a um a tourist mecca, but it's there's tourism here. I know there is, and I don't think it just seems like the way people design cities, they just don't care about either the people who live there, the local culture, or the local like the it just doesn't seem like they care about the local people at all. Like it's all about building these big boxes. And it's like you talk to so many people, and I I'm obsessed with architecture. So when I am talking to people, the subject of architecture inevitably comes up, and every single person I've talked to from all different walks of life, none of them like this type of architecture. Like none of them. So I don't know who's the one who's requesting to build these buildings. Like who looks at these and decides, I love that architecture so much, I'm going to build this. And see some remnants of downtown here. Honestly, if you showed me a picture of Toronto or Vancouver, I wouldn't be able to tell them apart. I would think, oh, which one's which? Not unless you showed me something that's like completely unique, like that one building I showed earlier that's I think over here somewhere. Now, the older architecture is not this is not unique to Canada. This was very popular in the US and in Canada, this sort of architecture. However, you know where you are when you see this architecture. You know that you're at the very least in the US or Canada because that's where this was popular. It was still a kind of a regional thing, even if it was more of on a national scale. Like you go back to this stuff, this could be anywhere. This is just anywhere type architecture. And I think it's I don't think that the whole globalism thing is a conspiracy. I don't believe that it's being well, at least not entirely being forced on people. I think it's just a consequence of having a world that's just completely connected. But I don't think that it's entirely a positive thing because you want to go somewhere and feel like you're part of that culture and have like roots and stuff. And you see places like this, cities like this. This is the reason why no, this is part. This might be a reason for people not wanting to stay in one spot and settle down and create a culture somewhere, or this might just be a symptom of it, of that whole international travel everywhere, don't stay in the same spot for very long sort of lifestyle. And I'm not against that. That's something that's been around for hundreds and hundreds of years. But at some point in time, there needs to be a thing where you actually kind of settle down and create a culture, and it's not just constantly the money going from here to there and having to move place to place to follow the money, and this sort of mixed area where nobody's the same sort of cultural group. Like and I realize this is Canada. It's way more sort of it's not homogeneous by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a little more so than maybe the US is. But oh, Westinghouse. Wonder if this is one of their office buildings. You don't see like just oh my gosh. I wouldn't call that hardcore. I'd call that generic as heck. I mean, what was there before wasn't great, but you typically want to, like, I believe in that old scout thing, like, leave something better than when you found it. And it doesn't look like a lot of these architects are doing that. You can see there's still little remnants of the old Toronto, like here and there. Like that's a very like you can see how much more real this is, the human scale of it. Like look at all the detail on here, all the different lines and stuff. Like it's such an interesting building to look at. It's way more interesting than I don't know that many architects are capable of producing something like this now. Like I don't even know if it's necessarily a preference to have something more streamlined. I think a lot of people just aren't capable of building this anymore. Like that skill has kind of gone away along with a lot of other skills. Something I never understood. Like see these windows that are really popular in Canada? I never really understood the reason for that because, like, this is another building that would have had double hung windows. I mean, all these buildings had double hung originally. Well, most of them did. Some of them had casement windows as well. But they just replaced the whole thing with this window where only the bottom opens and only a little bit, like only this section. I never understood that. And you see these windows everywhere in Canada. Like I just don't see the appeal of these. I mean, if I have a double hung, like it's divided in half right here, and this whole lower section can open, and that's half the window is just completely open to the breeze. I mean, you just don't get that here. Maybe you can remove both of these pieces and get like what is that, like 2/5 of the window open? But you can't get like half of it open and like and one of the other benefits of the double hung windows was you could slide this part down so that like see you've got this nice cornice here. If it's raining, then you can still have the window open by opening the top here, and it will at least the building's cornice will offer a little bit of protection and preventing the rain from getting in. Like this is a really nice cornice here, and it was also a safety thing because if people had kids up here, then they wouldn't have to worry about their like really young children accidentally climbing out the open lower section of the window because they would just slide the top down. But again, you can't do that with these windows. I don't see the appeal. If there's any Canadians in the comments, let me know why these windows are so popular. I mean, even on this building, they kind of look out of place because you can tell that it had just traditional double hung windows here originally. I mean, in the like you never see these in the U.S. Like the only spot you really see them is like in like the northwest, like up in like Washington, like the state of Washington, not the city. Like that's really the only spot you see those windows in the U.S. just because it's so close to Canada. So like it. Somebody let me know why those types of windows are or were so popular. Like even on this building here, I like these way better. Now see how these worked was this section here, this big lower section, this would have twisted to the side, and that's how these windows opened. And like you got an advantage even over double hung because like 2/3 of this you could open at one time, and you could angle this any way you wanted so it could actually catch the breeze a little bit. Again, the big cornice here, cornice on this building. We're getting into the prettier section of town here. At least I think it's the prettier section. I don't know. I'm probably offending a lot of people from Toronto. Like our downtown looks great, but there's a certain amount of Now, my favorite architecture is Victorian, which is known for not being symmetrical, especially on like houses and things. But people tend to really like symmetry, and so this is so to most people looking at this, this is a very well, it's a pleasing building to me as well. But I'm just talking for maybe a different reason than why I like it. I like it because I like the architecture a lot. A lot of people would look at this and like the sort of pleasing symmetry of it. It's kind of ordered, but there's enough here to keep your mind interested when you're looking at it. And again, this probably had more characteristic windows in it, and they replaced them with just these, which I don't know. Are these look like they might be sliders? So at the I don't know. They might just be the regular kind that you. It's hard to tell. These might be sliders, or they might just be regular ones, just glass that's in there. Like they did the same thing to this building where it's just panes of glass. It's like everybody talks about being more energy efficient and things like that, and it's like it's easier to be energy efficient when you can open up the windows during the summer and not have to run the AC, but I don't know, maybe Toronto is like unbelievably uncomfortable in the summer, so there's no need to open the windows. You got more of these style, which I do like. I very much like this style. If you really want to go for something more simplified, this is the style to do it with on these older buildings. I mean, you get the nice picture window down here. There's not a ton of complicated surfaces to clean for the window cleaners. But you have the advantage of these, at least originally would have opened. I don't know if they still do. They might be sealed now, but originally they would have opened. But what did that look like originally? It looked like it had an addition on the front of it. Um, huh. I guess they wanted an outdoor seating area. Yeah, it looks like it. Gas station next door. I wonder where, like, I've noticed in a lot of cities they're just getting rid of gas stations like left, front, and center. Like every gas station is being closed, and it just makes you wonder, like, where do people actually buy their gas at? I guess they have to buy it before they come downtown. Like I'm all for making cities like urban again to where it's more walkable and but I don't know. I'm not like now this is Toronto right here. This is very quintessential Toronto. These sort of buildings here, they're in a similar style to American buildings, but in this form, the way that they're built here, this is quintessential Toronto. They're actually different than what you see in United States cities. Like I believe the windows are larger. Like these are a lot larger than our windows here. The architecture is a little different. There's a little bit of French influence. Like this here, how it's got just the arch wind. Like in the buildings in the U.S., you wouldn't normally have in like shop buildings like these. You wouldn't normally have windows like this. They would be a little bit smaller, and and just the architecture would be a little bit different. There'd be a lot more sort of like white either cement or stone accents on it. Whereas a lot of these buildings are just one sort of a monotone kind of material, which there's nothing wrong with that. There's enough architecture here that you can do that. And I also like down here the overhang over here, so that like if it's raining or something, like while you're opening the door, you're not standing in the rain. Like a lot of this stuff was thought of by people years ago, and it's just stuff that nobody really cares about anymore. Or in the case of buildings like this, I guess they don't want people sleeping in the doorways and stuff. So oftentimes they'll almost always on a new building have a flat front here. It won't be this little indent for the door. But they thought about things like that back then. And And like with these power lines, this is quintessential Toronto as well. I have never seen another city with power lines like this. Or at the very least, it's unique to Canada. I think they're in Vancouver as well, but you don't see these types of power lines in many places outside the big cities in Canada. But again, another atrocious glass box here. Um, I just again, I don't see the appeal of living there. The only people I could see like living in buildings like this would be like spinsters. Like I don't think this is the type of place you'd move if you wanted to stay in an area for a while and have kids and stuff. Like this is the type of building somebody but like it's very I don't know. There's like enough older buildings around it. Like here's the thing with an area like this. It's gonna look nice because there's a variety of architectural styles here. So it like this doesn't look as bad as it could because you've got nature here and then across the street you've got traditional architecture to kind of contrast it. So it's not as bad as it could look, but it could be a whole lot worse if the whole neighborhood was just buildings like this, which a lot of them are, as you saw from downtown. And I'm not throwing shade at Toronto for these sort of buildings. Like every city where I live in the US looks like this too. And it looks just as bad here. So in case you think I'm only criticizing Toronto, I'm not. Toronto just happens to be the subject today. Again, another place that's just like they just stripped all the soul out of this building. Like the windows are a huge part of the personality of a building. And I see this done a lot with factories where they'll take out the original factory windows and they'll just put panes of glass in like this, and it just completely takes like a lot of the soul from the architecture. See, a lot of factory buildings, and I'll point out one if I see one. A lot of those factories, the windows were part of the architecture. Like they were designed to kind of fit in with the architectural style of the building. So when you put in new windows, it changes the building a lot. Like, and this is a mistake a lot of people make is replacing the windows, but not replacing them with something that kind of matches the style. Like this building right here looks, yeah, these are new windows that it has, but you can see these windows mirror the style of the building. Like it would have had windows that look like this before in it. So they've actually kept the style, which is very nice, and kept this very sort of Canada looking building here. Like U.S. cities aren't like they don't have not all of them have architecture this pretty. You go to places like San Francisco and like Philadelphia, and they have a lot of this Victorian, this very pretty Victorian architecture. But you go to like New York City. New York City doesn't have a lot of this. A lot of it's just the tenement buildings, and they're not ugly, but they're just not as interesting. And just typical '90s bland, like not particularly interesting building. But we are getting into the small businesses again. You know, I looked up a really interesting list of small businesses, and maybe I'll do a video about that. But one of the countries that had the most small businesses per capita, it really surprised me. And the US was like pretty low on the list. I think we were around the middle to lower section of it. But it was like Thailand or something like that that had the most businesses per person. It was one of those like Asian countries. But then immediately after that was like Sweden. Like I didn't expect Sweden to have that many small businesses, but apparently Sweden is like overflowing with small businesses. I wish we had this nice light rail here. We just have crappy buses that don't run on time and they stink and the insides are uncomfortable and crappy and oh man, our bus system. How much does our bus system suck in my city? It is the worst public transit system. Actually, it was rated as one of the worst in the country, fun fact. If you want to know something about my neck of the woods. But this is the type of architecture I like, this like Victorian architecture, but I don't know why they painted it because it probably like see how yeah, and there used to be windows here too. Yeah, this has been altered a lot. This whole facade of this building, and you can see how much the alterations kind of took away. Like this would have had more depth to it. It would have had more detail, and it looks like it's missing stuff, which it literally is because a lot of it's been changed. These haven't been changed all that much, but even just painting them kind of like you don't need to paint brick. The only times you really that people really painted brick was like in like working class buildings because they were usually made with cheap porous brick, and so you had to paint it to kind of keep your house from like all the paint from peeling off the walls in your house. This is another very, very boring, like, all these areas, man. Like, the people who build them, I don't think actually have to live in these areas, so I don't think they're too concerned with it just be feeling like home. They just want to build it and sell it to people with very, very deep pockets. This is another Toronto thing. These buildings you only these types of houses in this style you only see in Toronto. Like we have duplexes like this, and like don't get offended. I call these duplexes. That's just we call them in my region. The technical term is semi-detached. I know a duplex is like you have one apartment on the first floor and one on the second, and that's what a duplex is. But I call these duplexes. So just, but these in this style with these pointed roofs, these are unique to Toronto to at the very least cities in Canada, and I think maybe specifically Toronto. These are even later ones, like, these are a little bit more simplified from the Victorian ones, but you can see they built these, like, later on. Oh, man, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head when these are built. They could have been built in the 1940s, or they could have been built in the 1910s, who knows? Because this type of architecture actually originated, like, these sort of the architecture with these types of lines, I think, originated in Germany, but I could be wrong. Like it reminds me of that sort of European architecture that you see. You see it all over Europe. It's not really unique to anywhere in particular. You see a lot of it in Britain. Now we're getting back to the actual like Victorian era ones, which again, this is my favorite style of architecture is the Victorian architecture. And you don't need to be as elaborate as these were to still create a very beautiful Victorian building, but you've got the lovely houses, the street trees, the gardens, and then you got this building here. I've heard Toronto and like well, all cities have gotten really expensive. Now you can blame there's a bunch of different reasons for that, and part of it's also due to like one of the ones is investors from China. They invest overseas. The wealthier ones invest overseas because they think rightly that it's a more secure option because I don't think property in China is as secure, but the prices have been going up like crazy, and it's not entirely the fault of China. I mean, there's plenty of blame to go around. Ooh, old van. That's neat. I don't know the names of those types of vans, but actually that's another thing I wanted to mention. Like these vans, that'll be its own video. Uh, I'm running out of things to talk about, so actually, oh, I like that. You don't see a lot of gas stations where they have a second floor over them. I think that's kind of cool. And it'd be frowned on now, but in the old days, they used to build the gas stations that were multiple stories, and sometimes they would have the person who owned it living over it, or sometimes it would be something else, like they'd rent it out. But I don't think you can even legally build that anymore, like a two-story gas station building. Probably some law against it now. But it's the end of the video. Just felt like complaining about architecture again. You guys be good and Merry Christmas.